You had $10 million last year, you have $10 million this year. But I'm going to say that you actually, and for this year, you also had $2 million in depreciation. The only way for your net fixed assets to remain the same is for you to have purchased on net $2 million of fixed assets. Because otherwise, your net fixed assets would have gone down by $2 million. That's why we're adding back the depreciation. This basically says you're going to get money from two places. Operating cash flow. But if you spent money on current assets, suppose you increase your inventory by $10 million. That means you actually use some of the operating cash flow to build up current assets. And similarly, fixed assets. You can think of this as net capital spending on short-term assets, right? Now, in terms of meaning, cash flow to creditors and cash flow to shareholders could be any sign. It could be positive, it could be negative. Suppose I made some interest payments, but I also borrowed extra money over and above what I paid on interest. That means cash flow to creditors is negative. Remember, if something is negative, that means you're getting money from them. So that's the meaning of the negative number. Similarly, cash flow to stockholders can be negative. Obviously, cash flow from assets could be any sign. And in and of itself, cash flow from assets being negative is not necessarily a bad sign. There are certain companies that keep making investments into fixed assets. For example, GE is one of them. Okay? They almost habitually have negative cash flow from assets. Why? Because they do spend a lot of money on that. Remember, companies like GE, they tend to have assets that produce return over a long period of time. If you're talking about Walmart, negative cash flow from assets is probably a bad thing. Because Walmart's assets, other than their warehouses, typically are assets that should produce returns in relatively short period of time. They don't spend that much money on fixed assets. Again, on a given year, if you have a large negative cash flow from assets, maybe you decided, for any reason you may think of, you're gonna beef up your inventory, or you're gonna allow a lot of your clients to pay on credit. That's gonna increase inventory and accounts receivable, which is gonna increase current assets, and if nothing else change on the current liabilities side, you basically spend money on working capital. That doesn't mean that you didn't have a good year. But if you keep having negative cash flows over successive periods of time, at least beware that there may be an issue with the firm. Just find out why is that happening. Now, let's briefly look at some of those numbers in an actual balance sheet. I'm going to go ahead and download GE's numbers since I talked about it. They're at sec.gov. Okay, zoom down so that I can get company filings. And ticker for GE is GE. $10Ks. Their last $10K. Okay, let's just skip that one. That's not what I want. I want the filing, not the documents. So that I can do interactive data and get the Excel documents. Oops, I was already there. Okay. Yeah, that's why it's doing it. All right. So let's kind of get some numbers. As I was telling you, these statements do not have a fixed set of names. G calls balance sheet statement of financial position. Go figure. Where's the income statement? Statement of earnings. That's what they call it. Now, let me kind of get some stuff started here. So I'm going to do this for 2022 only. Some of it is I'm going to get just the numbers here. Net income. They actually lost $64 million that year. Depreciation and stuff. That you're gonna find in statement of cash flows. Depreciation, amortization, what have you. And they also have amortization of intangible assets. That typically stuff you wanna take out for operating cash flow. Interest and financial charges. I'm gonna have change in current assets. Current, and that's gonna be in statement of financial position, which is balance sheet. That is the total current assets. Current assets this year minus current assets last year. They actually reduced their current assets. Changing current liabilities. Same deal. Where are you? Oh, statement of financial position. They actually increased their current liabilities. And this is, you can think of it as change in fixed assets. Well, let's call it change in assets. Actually, let me get to total assets, because I won't change in fixed assets.